Yes, the clerk has reminded me that we have a quorum, so we could call to order the meeting. First of all, first item, confirmation of minutes of the last meeting. No comments from members. Next, second item, information papers issued since the last meeting. They've been forwarded to members. Item 3 of the agenda, items for discussion at the next meeting. Now, on the 14th of July, for our regular meeting, the administration is not proposing any new items, so we have nothing on the agenda for the time being. But then the clerk has reminded me that perhaps after our discussion today on the 3-1-way system, we could schedule a public hearing for the 14th of July meeting. And then, of course, Mr. Albert Chan has twice mentioned the issue of auto-track. But then what we have done is that Mr. Albert has sent us a letter. He's asked us to pass it on to members. We've done so. And then the reply from the administration is out. And then there's a second point. Third point, there's one member of the public who has certain views on the item. That letter has been forwarded to the administration. The administration is preparing a reply to us. So that's ongoing. So at the regular meeting on the July 14th, we'll see what we do with that. But perhaps if members believe whether we need to have a public hearing on the third runway or whether we need to deal with Mr. Albert Chan's item, I think I'd like to listen to your views now. Mr. Chairman, I agree we should have a public hearing on the 14th of July. I think that will help the airport authority and administration to hear the views from all relevant parties. Albert, well, definitely we need a public hearing on the third runway, but can you make such arrangements for the meeting? I think for the auto-track case, it wouldn't take too long. Perhaps for the first half hour or so of the meeting, we could deal with the auto-track and then we can have the public hearing. Well, that's a good idea. So the Secretariat will make arrangements then. Now, if we have public hearing on the 14th of July, of course, we will have to invite district councils as well. Let's see how many there are from them. And perhaps if members have no objection, let's use the first half hour on the auto-track item. And then for the remaining 1.5 hours, we'll have a public hearing on the third runway. If the response is overwhelming, then we'll see how we deal with it. But anyway, for now, there's no other items scheduled for that meeting, so let's do it this way. Now, can we invite the administration in, please?
我仲有樣嘢嘅，原來。各位早晨。
Good morning. I'm not going to introduce your team one by one because time is precious. Members and government representatives, this item should take us to 12:15, so we have over an hour. Administration, please take us through the paper, but of course we would like to save time for members' questions, and please don't spend too much time on the introduction. Can you finish your briefing in 10 minutes, please? If you can't do so, let us know. 10 minutes, is that enough? Well, let me quickly make an introduction, and then I'll invite the airport authority to give a briefing. Now, the aviation industry, one of the most important industries in Hong Kong. The Hong Kong International Airport is an important infrastructure project to support the development of our economy, to ensure long-term sustainable development of the economy. We actively take measures to improve the measures and the facilities and the capacity of the Hong Kong IA is to consolidate our role as an international aviation center. At the same time, we want to make sure there is promotion of development in the trade and commerce and financial services and so on. And we're going to see the Hong Kong IA's capacity reaching its capacity. So it's important that we expand the airport if we want to maintain our status as an international aviation hub. Now, in there was approval given for the Airport Authority to proceed with the planning of the project. In the past 2 years or so, the administration has been helping the Airport Authority to carry out EIA, sort out the design details for the expansion and so on. The Airport Authority has now completed the EIA report. And then from the 20th of June, within the 30 days of statutory period, the EIA report is available for public inspection. We have considered the impact of the 3RS on the economy, the positive impact and negative impact and so on. And of course, we have taken a stringent approach in conducting the EIA. We want to come up with mitigation measures to mitigate any impact of the project on the environment, together with the public, district councillors, local residents, and so on. We been having constant liaison. We want to listen to the views and on how we proceed with the free one-way system. The administration is going to make a final decision. If we could proceed with this project, that will help to promote the economic development of Hong Kong. We would like members to support the free one-way system project. Now I'll invite the Airport Authority to give us a PowerPoint presentation. Thank you. As you know, the Hong Kong International Airport is busy, you know that. Since 2010, it's become the world's busiest cargo airport. And of course, cargo shipment is important for Hong Kong. And since 2013, our airport's become the third busiest international passenger airport. Now, how do we see that our airport is busy? There are some indicators. The most important must be air traffic movement. Moving from Kai Tak to Chek Lap Kok, you can see that in 1998 it's 28 million. Last year is 60 million passenger traffic. This year we expect it to go up to 63 million. And cargo traffic, it was 1.63 million, and now it's 4.13 million in 2013. So 150% increase. Air traffic movement last year, it was 372,000. And compared to the Kai Tak days, it's an increase of 1.3 times. So we have about 1,050 flight movements every hour now, more or less. And our design capacity every day is to accommodate 1,200 flight movements. So we have now about 1,005 flight movements every day. The consultation was conducted with various parties in the past few years. And then we have done some projection or forecast based on different scenarios of growth. We want to see when the airport might reach its capacity. You see the blue line, the orange line, and the green line. So these are the three growth scenarios. The highest growth rate assumed is 3.6%. If we assume that 3.6% growth rate, that means the airport will reach saturation in about 2021. And then last year, 2013, 372,000 flight movements. And 2013, as you can see, when we did the 2013 forecast some years back, we expected the 370,000 target to be reached only in 2016. So that means the airport is reaching saturation faster than originally forecast by about 3 years. And just now, Mr. Yao pointed out the aviation industry is important, not just to the airport is not just important to the aviation industry, is also important to support our four major economic pillars. For example, trading and logistics, financial services, professional and producer services, and tourism. For all these four major economic pillars, they account for 58% of our GDP, and about they provide about 50% of the jobs in Hong Kong. So the Hong Kong International Airport has positive economic impact on these industries. Now, can I now invite Mr. Lee to take you through the rest of the PowerPoint? Now, the free runway system is not just about a runway. It is actually a massive infrastructure project. You see now we have 2 runways in the midfield section. The midfield concourse is now being built. It's expected to be completed at the end of next year. It will provide another 20 parking stands. And then to the west of the airport, we are building more cargo parking stands. But by the end of by the completion of the project, we would have used up all the space. So that's why we need an extra one-way. That means there will be land formation of approximately 650 hectares. For Terminal 2, it will have to be substantially expanded. It will become a fully integrated terminal, and it will be linked to the new concourse in the reclamation area. For the free RS, the free one-way system, Mr. Chen has already explained that in detail. I won't go into details again. Now, we have submitted a EIA report to the Environmental Protection Department in April 2014. It covers 12 key aspects: air noise, water, ecology, that is the impact on Chinese white Chinese dolphin, and so on. Now, the EPD has informed us that we have met the requirements of the EIA guidelines, and now the report is available for public inspection for 1 month. Outside of the EIA, in response to public views, we have also conducted a Hong Kong IA carbon emission study. The study is soon to be completed, and we will announce the findings soon.
We have employed both local and overseas experts to carry out the EIA. Take health impact as an example. We have asked Professor Wang Chi-wai from Hong Kong, from CU. He's here, and then we've also asked Dr. Peng Wasik and Dr. Tom Jefferson, who's here today, to conduct a study on Chinese white dolphins. Tom started his study on white dolphins in Hong Kong from 1995, and I think he is one of the most veteran experts in Hong Kong in this area. We have proposed over 250 initiatives to address the environmental issues. According to our findings, whether it's during construction or in operation phase, the impacts are acceptable. There are a few important mitigation measures. Regarding aircraft noise, when we have the 3RS, we propose to put the south runway on standby at night from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. Right now, this is not possible because we have an around-the-clock operation airport. And after 1 a.m., we have to close one of the runways for maintenance. And if we are working on the north runway, then we have to use the south. In future, the south runway will be on standby, and we can choose between the center runway and the third runway. The south runway is 1.5 kilometers away from Tung Chung, whereas for the central runway, it is over 3 kilometers away from Tung Chung. We also have very close liaison with the CAD. Please go on. We're very close communication with CAD, and we've got their confirmation when it comes to the design of flight path. The white one will be new flight path after the third runway is commissioned. From 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., however, it will not be used. For the west flow flight tracks, we've also added one, and also track 6. It can go southwards through Lama Channel for landing to avoid the populated areas. We also propose to carry out incentive for charging scheme to encourage airlines to use quieter aircraft in Hong Kong. The 2 planes shown here are being introduced into Hong Kong. They can benefit in terms of air emission and noise. And the airport is carrying out various emission initiatives. Usually when aircraft are parked, they still have air conditioning and power supply, relying on their supplementary engines. Now we have fixed ground power. Now it is used on a voluntary basis. We require all airlines to use this system. By the end of 2014. This will greatly reduce emissions. And by the end of 2017, we want to change all our saloon vehicles on air side to electric vehicles. And by end 2018, we hope to have over or about 290 charging stations for electric vehicles that will be the most advanced in Hong Kong. We're also concerned about the impact on Chinese white dolphins. We have proposed a number of measures. We'd like to reduce the extent of reclamation as far as possible. It's now cut from 800 hectares to around 650. During the construction phase, we have proposed to use a non-dredge method for land formation. You see the area in red. It is within the government's pits. We have to remove the soft silt first and before filling back, if it is the conventional method. This will be very detrimental to our ecology. So we'll introduce non-dredge methods such as deep cement mixing. So the cement will be solidified before filling there. And this technology is being used in Japan and Korea, but perhaps not in pits. So we have tested this out, and it's proved that it won't affect our ecology, marine ecology. Can you please go through the remaining 3 or 4 slides more briefly? All right. During the breeding season, we will not use the traditional piling method, and we have a number of mitigation measures to keep the speed of working vessels at to below 10 knots. And we will also establish dolphin exclusion zones, and there will also be rerouting of sky pier ferries. And in our report, we are going to designate a big marine park so as to connect the 3 important areas of Sha Chao, and the area will be about 2,400 hectares. The total of 4 existing marine parks in Hong Kong, and so together with the existing marine parks, there will be an area over 5,000. We hope that in the long term, this can contribute to the conservation of white dolphins in Hong Kong. Our experts can supplement later. I pause here. Thank you. Secretary, can you read out the names of members who intend to ask questions in their speaking order? All right, declaration of interest. Yes, a declaration of interest from me too. We have Elizabeth Quat, Chen Kam Lam, Albert Chen, Lam Tai Fai, Tan Kar Pew, Kenneth Leung, Yu Siwing, Stephen Ho, Chen Han Pan, Michael Tian. Have we missed any? All right, and Christopher Zhang. And Frankie Yik. All right, I draw a line here. Is it okay for me to draw a line here? 12 members. That's not bad. We can allow 5 minutes each. That will be exactly 1 hour, and that will take us to 12:10, and we'll be ready for the next item. Since we have 5 minutes each, well, members are free to just express your comments. But if you expect replies, please leave 2 minutes for the administration to reply. It will be more meaningful if you have time to ask follow-up questions. Ms. Elizabeth Quat, thank you. Well, to strengthen Hong Kong's position as an international aviation hub, DAB is always in support of the construction of the third runway as soon as possible. However, we are concerned about the ever-increasing construction costs. The later we build the runway, the more costly it will be. And there is also competition from nearby airports. Take Baiyun Airport as an example. They said that by 2020, their throughput will overtake Hong Kong. Given such keen competition, will it be the case that by the time our third runway is completed, it would have lost its economic benefits and become a white elephant? How can we control costs to ensure that this runway will not be too extravagant? What measures do you have to control costs? Under Secretary, may I chip in? When the new airport was built, we had 5,000 imported workers. Are you going to do the same for this? Thank you, Ms. Quat, for your questions and also the support in principle from DAB. We appreciate the need for the expansion of the airport. As Ms. Quat said, neighborhood airports are also expanding. If we do not catch up quickly, we'll face very fierce competition, and we will face a lot of constraints and may lose out in the competition. So we do want to press ahead with the construction as soon as possible. As regards inflation, of course, we do understand that there will be cost pressure if we delay the project. We hope that by 2016 we can start works for completion in 2023. We believe this is a rather pragmatic timetable. How are we going to control costs? We do set a lot of store by that, and both the Hong Kong AA and the government are concerned. So we have set up a steering committee chaired by the Financial Secretary in terms of labor requirements and regulations and discussion with the mainland on the necessary support. The steering committee will see to these issues. And if we have to seek the support of the Council in any regard, we look forward to support from members. But my question is answered. Are you going to commission an independent financial study? When can it be completed and findings submitted to us? Well, there will be two aspects. As far as financial aspect is concerned, Hong Kong AA is the project proponent. It has got its own financial consultants to work out the costs and also possible revenue. But that's a separate study by the Hong Kong AA. The government will employ its own financial consultant to verify information from the airport authority. We expect that the financial model from the financing model from the A will be completed by the end of this year. Now, Baiyun Airport will surpass us by 2020, but the new runway can only be completed in 2023. And business loss may not come back. So how are we going to tackle this? Our positioning is an international aviation hub for the airport in Guangzhou. Yes, it has got international lines, but I think their main target is domestic business. Well, so relatively speaking, Hong Kong is an international and regional aviation hub, and Bayonne Airport is different. What about importing 5,000 workers when the new airport was built? We have to employ different means to ensure we have enough labor force. This is not a problem solely faced by the airport. We hope that the government can adopt a more open attitude. You're lucky because time is just up for Ms. Quat. Mr. Chen Kam-lam. The Undersecretary said that Hong Kong's airport is an international aviation. The other airports in the PRD are not international airports. Well, only time will tell whether this is true or not, because our new runway can only be commissioned in 2023, and in the coming 10 years, new developments in airports in the PRD will challenge us. Hong Kong is the third largest international airport in the world, but competition is still fierce in the future. So we must really race with time to ensure that the third railway should be completed in time, if not earlier. The government must remember our hard lesson learned with the Hong Kong Macau Bridge. We may face a similar situation when the airport is concerned, because we all remember the EIA for the bridge. There was a judicial challenge and there were additional requirements, and that may cause slippage, and the extra construction cost is astronomical. So my question for the administration is, you find the EIA report from the Hong Kong AA acceptable. You believe all the requirements are fulfilled, but will there be possible areas where there may be challenges? And if people ask for something extra, how are you going to handle that? Will you see the project delayed for 2-3 years as we did in the bridge? Now, people are very concerned about marine life, environmental protection, and the Chinese white dolphins. During land formation, can you help the Chinese white dolphins to relocate their habitat so that they won't be affected? Yes, we do agree with Mr. Chan's views.
On EIA, we have encountered certain problems in the past. That's why this time round, the airport authority is taking its work very meticulously, and perhaps they could answer the question. Now, Mr. Chen asked about the Chinese white dolphin. How can we minimize the impact? Perhaps I could ask the airport authority colleagues to reply to that question. Before we invite our experts to speak on the Chinese white dolphin, just now there's a question about the international airport. So one of the airports in the Pearl River Delta is exactly because our neighboring airports are developing quickly and there's a huge demand. That's why, as the member pointed out, we have to race with time. If we don't move forward, we'll be left behind. So that's the most important consideration, actually, for this whole project. Whether there will be judicial review or not is right for the people of Hong Kong. There's there's no way we could predict it one way or the other. But we believe we have complied with all the requirements of the EIA ordinance in conducting this EIA. Chinese white dolphin, well, it's a rather sentimental issue, if I may put it that way. We have an expert, Dr. Jefferson, here. Perhaps he could talk to us about what he's proposing on mitigation measures in relation to the Chinese white dolphins, and perhaps he could also dispel some of the misconception about this issue, actually.
Is this okay? Yes, thank you for that question about Chinese white dolphins. As I understand it, you were asking about the concern about Chinese white dolphins being displaced or moving to another area during the construction of the airport. And that is something that was evaluated during the EIA process. We have looked at our previous experience with this dolphin population in Hong Kong, and we have the benefit of having done studies towards not during the early stages, but towards the latter stages of the airport construction for the original airport back in the mid-1990s to late 1990s. And we have evaluated that the most likely impacts in relation to dolphin movements during the construction phase of the airport would be that dolphins would shift out of the parts of their home range that occur near the airport work area and shift into those parts of their home range that are actually further away from that area of potential disturbance. Some of those areas may be in Chinese waters. Some of those areas may be in other parts of Hong Kong, where, for instance, along the west coast of Lantau, or even the southwest coast of Lantau, or near the Sha Chao Lung Jiao Marine Park. So we do expect to see some decrease in numbers of dolphins within and near the work area during the construction phase. And this would probably result in some decrease in numbers of dolphins in Hong Kong overall during this time period. And this is the main reason why we felt it was very important to propose a large marine park as part of the mitigation and compensation for this project.
I'm sorry, I have to stop you because we have another item agenda later. 嗱，各位，而家我要揸翻緊啲啦，因為單仲偕議員又想問問題。
Now, I have to be strict now because Mr. Sin Chung Kai would also like to ask questions. So a total of 30 members wish to ask questions. If you want them to reply, please allow them time to do so. And be short with your questions. Now, yes, we see, we can understand why there's need for additional runway. I think for the Chek Lap Kok Airport, even 4 runways or 6 runways would not be considered too many. For some international airports, they have 8 runways. So if we look at the actual demand in Hong Kong, is of course necessary for us to increase the number of runways. With additional runways, there will be additional flight movements, and also with the different wind direction, it means the different usage for the runways. And so definitely there's a need for additional runways. But whether Chek Lap Kok is the right place for additional runways, that's the question. Because at that time, I was a member of the Advisory Council on Environment. I studied the EIA report. At the time, there was a lot of underestimation in that report and a lot of flaws and errors too in that report. So here, it's not about the economic dimension of the issue. We know there's a need for additional runways, but it's about the environment, whether Chek Lap Kok is the right place for an additional runway. That's why I have suggested we discuss the EIA report, but then the panel on environmental affairs, but then I was told that this panel would take up this issue. But I don't think this panel is the place for considering the EIA report in detail. Anyway, I would like a dedicated discussion on the EIA report. At that time, when the about the aviation fuel, the Advisory Council on Environment discussed the matter 3 times. And noise issue, I've been pursuing this matter for over a decade. I've asked the administration to provide the NEF for Chek Lap Kok. What is the current NEF? No department will supply that information to me to this date. So after the meeting, Mr. Chairman, please direct the Civil Aviation Department to provide the 25 NEF for the Chek Lap Kok Airport to us, so we can give us some diagrams so we can see what the situation is like now. Now, my own assessment is this, Mr. Chairman. Chek Lap Kok is definitely not the place for a 3rd runway. For the 3rd runway, definitely, it will lead to the extinction of the Chinese white dolphins. And then on aviation noise and air pollution, we could set those aside for the time being. To the south, northwest of the airport, that's where the Chinese white dolphins are the most active. And if you're going to reclaim land for 500 hectares there, so it's like obliterating the habitat for the Chinese white dolphin altogether. Then there will be additional vessel movements and other activities. Definitely, it will be a disaster for the ecology in that area. Now, there will be public consultation, but I hope we would get the report as soon as possible. Well, you've asked a really valid question. Please let them answer. Well, I want you to answer, Mr. Chairman. No, about the EIA report. I hope the panel on environmental affairs will consider the report. Yes, fine, but Denny, do you have the report, first of all? Do you have the report? They started public consultation on the 20th of June. The EIA report has been submitted, and since the 20th of June, there's a public consultation. Members asking about the Cheklap-Kok situation currently. What about the NEF 25 map? Do you have it? Well, they say dolphins and noise. Give us the information after the meeting, because I've asked for it many times. You would never give it to me. I asked for it 2 years ago. You wouldn't give it to me. Now, in our EIA report, one scenario we have to cover is the current situation. So we have used the 2011 full year figures for the NEF 25. So it's only because you've published the report now you would provide information, but for the past decade or so you refuse to give us the NEF 25 report. Well, let's not talk about the past. You've asked for it, they say they will give it to you, right? Now, can you give us the report after the meeting? I'll get the report separately, but for the NEF 25 the current situation, give it to us as soon as possible. There are only 10 seconds left. Let's not ask more questions. I'm sure other members will also ask about dolphins. Dr. Lam Tai-Fai. Mr. Chairman, on the overall development of Hong Kong and maintaining our competitiveness, I agree we should build the third runway at the Cheklap-Kok Airport as soon as possible. In any country, in any society, development is about a race. If you stand still, then very soon you'll be overtaken by your competitors and you lose your competitive edge. So you'll be left behind. Now, in the past few months, we've seen that in terms of government controlling the construction works progress and controlling costs, I have lost confidence, especially like the Guangzhou Hong Kong Express Rail Link case. Now, I've lost confidence. Now, this project is to be completed in 2013. There may be a lot of variables. And I don't know on how many occasions you might allow benefit of the doubt, because I can see you are rather incompetent in overseeing projects. And then you have poor judgment too, it seems. If that remains the case, I don't think this project could be completed on time, and certainly there will be cost overrun, and there's no guarantee on the quality. Now, I fully support the construction of the third runway, but doesn't mean I have faith in you that you do a proper job. Now, if you look at the 2030 plan, at the time, the estimated cost was $130 billion, but then in recent news report, it says that the cost might go up to $200 billion. That means every Hong Kong person has to pay $30,000. Is everyone willing to pay that amount? So what is the latest cost estimate? Be honest. Come clean with that. Otherwise, when you start works in later on, and then you tell us then the cost would be $200 billion, and maybe people may have different views. Maybe they rather go to Shenzhen to take a flight. Now, I know you can't guarantee whether there will be cost overrun, but at least tell us what is the latest cost estimate for the entire project. And second point, I read from news report that Airport Authority, I think the chairman is going to be replaced, right? It seems that for the two chairmen, they didn't work together well in the past, and they have different thinking. So would the new chairman start afresh? Maybe he will overrule all previous projects. He wants to do assessments afresh, and that may affect the final completion date of the project, or even the quality of the project. So you have to assure the public that there will be smooth transition between the two incoming and outgoing chairmen. And you have to tell the public whether there will be any negative impact. Now, okay, I support building the runway, but give me some figures. What if there's a delay of 1 year? Because I'm worried there will be a project delay. If it's delayed by 1 year, what is the economic loss to Hong Kong? And what is the loss if there's a delay of 2 years? Because it's possible that you could have suffered a delay of 2 or 3 years for projects spanning from 2016 to 2023. So what is the economic loss for each year of delay? 4 questions altogether. I don't think you could take all 4 questions. Try your best, Under Secretary. I could appreciate Dr. Lam's concerns on the cost. It's too early to say, because for the airport authority or the administration, too early to say. So how did the $130 billion come about? Well, that was in 2013. Now, don't answer his questions. Answer my questions. Oh, sorry. Now, the figures were provided 2 years ago, but of course, with time and with the latest conditions, the airport authority will have to provide revised figures, and the administration will verify those figures. That's the first point. Second point, about the chairman's question, or the question about the senior management. For the current chairman, he's made it clear, and he assumed the post that promoting the development of the airport is one of his important missions. For the incoming chairman, he also attaches great importance to this issue. So there's not going to be a case of any major differences in opinions. It's really just about how we get the job done. I think it's important mission for the entire airport authority, and the government will have a senior supervision committee to supervise the work. Now, you should give me back some time. What about economic loss?
We don't have the data with us yet. Okay. Mr. Tan Ka-pio. Thank you, Chairman. Now, if things go smoothly, then works can start in 2013. I think they're being optimistic. They have not taken into account a possible judicial review and also the difficulties that will be encountered in this council. So what about the most pessimistic completion date? Do you have a worst case scenario? Now, if it cannot be completed by a certain year, perhaps we may as well give up the project altogether. So do you have any time frame for that? And secondly, compensation. I'm from Tung Chung. Of course, you have clarified many times that the deterioration in air quality of Tung Chung has nothing to do with the airport. But regarding ozone, it is particularly serious in Tung Chung. Professor Wang is here. You are very concerned about this subject. Now, even if there is no causal effect there, to get the support of the community, perhaps you should do something for carbon compensation. For instance, greening measures, so that residents in Tung Chung can be more confident in this project. Well, there are less than 70,000 jobs in the airport, but they are not all fully filled because the working hours are long and the transportation costs are high. So if you expand the number of jobs to 140,000, are you confident that you can fill all the vacancies? If you do not address the problem of transportation costs, you won't be able to recruit enough men for yourself. All right, a more pessimistic estimate. The airport is very important to the economy and our society. I hope that we can secure the support of all sectors in Hong Kong, including this council. If there is a judicial review, well, we believe that it is their right, but I hope that they can consider the general interest of Hong Kong. We cannot preempt now whether there will be a judicial review, whether we have difficulties in funding requests with this council. Of course, we don't want that to happen. The timetable we propose now is a pragmatic one. We hope that we can complete the planning within that time frame. And remaining questions are for the AA. Mr. Ng, recruitment. Thank you. Transportation difficulties. We have always discussed with the community and business partners of the airport. In recent couple of years, we've got the assistance of the bus companies. We have boosted the frequency of buses, and we also maintained very close liaison with the industry, hoping that we can provide the level of transportation support for our staff and provide subsidies in transport fares. Compensation to the Tung Chung community. You may not like the term compensation, but can you do something to get the support of the Tung Chung community? Well, as we said, ozone is not directly related to the operation of the airport. And for improving the air quality of the area, we have proposed measures. And for carbon emission, we have a target of reducing carbon emission. We have cut carbon emission by over 15% using 2008 as the baseline. Communication with the Tung Chung community. As the EIA report said, we invited residential developments of Tung Chung to, meaning their representatives, to observe the operation of the airport. They gave us some suggestions. So regarding emissions and air quality, we'll try to communicate with them. And then we are going to work on this. Thank you. Dr. Fernando Chiang, I'm afraid we drew the line 15 minutes ago. And next time you should come earlier and sign in first before you walk out of the room. Now, if members have a few questions, I suggest you ask one, let them reply first, and then ask again. Otherwise, they may just take the easiest question and neglect the rest. Mr. Kenneth Leung. I have three questions. It said that land formation has been reduced from 800 hectares to 650. I'd like to know, among the 650, how much will be used for building the runway and how much for building other facilities? And is there scope to further reduce the scope of land formation? Mr. Choi, Project Director. Thank you, Mr. Leung, for your question. Land formation of 650 hectares. Well, we have the concourse, the runway, and also the necessary facility to support the operation of the third runway. There is such a requirement, the EIA, to justify each and every inch of extra land formed. So there's certainly no inflation here. No. I want you to use the concept of absolute necessity. Can you further reduce the scope of land formation? Yes, what we propose here is absolutely necessary. Please review this once again. My second question. In Mr. Hui's briefing, he said that by 2019, the two runways will be saturated. What was the projected takeoff and landings per hour by 2019 back then? 68 landings and takeoff per runway per hour. All right, that was 75. According to your target, it was 75 per hour. Now, with third runway, then the number of landings and taking offs will be 120 per hour. However, have you considered things like wind shear and the geographical location of the airport, and also constraints in other areas of control. 120, is it your most generous estimate, or can you ensure that you can reach the target of 120 per hour? Mr. Lee, can you please just raise your hand and if you would like to reply? As Mr. Hui said, our maximum capacity now is 68 per hour. In future, with 3 runway, it will be 120 because we've asked the consultant for the British Airport to do the study for us. We have taken into account various constraints and also the make of aircraft. For Heathrow, they have got over 80 per hour. How come we've only got 68 per hour in Hong Kong? Because there is a safety distance between aircraft, and so our ratio of a large aircraft to small aircraft is 65 to 35 in Hong Kong, whereas in Heathrow is 3 to 7. It's because in Hong Kong we are more hilly and Heathrow is relatively flat, and these are constraints to the operation of our runway. But 120 is the target after they have taken into account all constraints, and they've also done a simulation, safety simulation. All right, about the white dolphins, I had a discussion with the professor some days ago. Why can't you carry out the mitigation measures or conservation first before you construct the runway? For instance, can you build the marine park at once in the coming few months, and then many of us will shut up here? So why don't you go through that step first before you build a new runway? Have you considered this possibility, Professor?
It's on. To speak. Okay. It's on.
Yes. Thank you for that question. My understanding is that the marine park, because it's right in the area completely surrounding the airport and the 3rd runway project area, that basically the 3rd runway cannot be built with the marine park restrictions in place. So it's just sort of a restriction of the way that the system is set up, that the marine park has to be established after the construction phase is finished.
Yeah, I think you can just establish a smaller scale marine park so that we know that you are serious and you are going to undertake this, promise. We are not asking for 2,400, acres. Instantaneously, you can just establish a smaller scale, and then so that this is a kind of strategy you should adopt. I mean, I'm just giving you some more ammunition, and if you are not listening, it's your problem.
好嘅，多謝你嘅意見。下一位姚思永。
Next, Mr. Yu Xiweng, I agree that we should press ahead quickly. Changi, they're going to build the 4th, and South Korea the 5th, and Shanghai, they are going to commission the 4th and the 5th runways, and we're now talking about a 3rd runway here. I'm worried that because of construction or engineering reasons, we can't have it in 2023. Now, if we fail to meet the target, what will be the additional construction cost per year? Has there been any calculation from the AA or the government? And according to the briefing, by 2019, our airport will be saturated. There will be economic loss to Hong Kong as a result. Have you worked out the economic loss to Hong Kong per year after 2019 because of the saturation of the airport? Do you have such data? Representative from AA? The date of saturation should be 2016, a few years from now, and is actually earlier than expected. Regarding the rising costs as a result of the delay in construction, can I ask our project directors to give us a summary? Of course, we have to take into account a number of factors. Now, assuming that we can have 3 runways in 2023, now for every year delay, the economic loss will be $9 to $10 billion per year. Now, are you talking about extra construction costs? No, economic loss to Hong Kong. A delay in the operation of 3RS. Regarding construction costs, as my colleague said, we're still working out the project budget. We must have the design first before we can have a more detailed estimate. Then you don't know about labor costs as well.
Mr. Yu, just now the airport authority said in its presentation that the airport is important for 50% of our GDP. So I think you would do the calculation properly. What is the economic loss for every year of delay, and which industries may be affected? Well, I think you have to be fair, Mr. Yu. You have to ask the Financial Secretary, how could the airport authority answer the question for you? We're talking about the economic loss for Hong Kong. It's not just about the airport, but they have to tell us. I don't think they are in a position to tell you. I don't think even the Undersecretary could answer you. Well, that's one figure. Anyway, the other, construction cost, how much more will it be? I hope you will tell us. Now, if the airport is reaching saturation in 2016, that means between 2016 and 2023, for aviation growth in Hong Kong, that will come to a standstill. Would there be any compensatory measures by the administration, and have you done any calculation about that? Let me first clarify. Now, with the current projection, that it will reach saturation, but doesn't mean the airport will come to a standstill. I think Mr. Hui perhaps could supplement. From our past experience, it's just saying that the growth would become sluggish upon saturation. It doesn't mean the airport operation will come to a standstill. And then in Mr. Hui's PowerPoint presentation, he referred to the 4 economic pillars. It doesn't mean that airport accounts for 58% of the GDP. Perhaps Mr. Hui could explain. We're talking about related industries, but then our estimation is that the airport accounts for about 4.6% of the GDP, the airport itself. No other questions? Next, Mr. Stephen Ho. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just now, DAB colleagues, members, expressed support for the construction of the 3rd runway in principle. As the representative of the agriculture and fisheries industries, can I go back to that slide on the key aspects, the 12 key aspects, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable? Now, on what basis did you say that this is a project acceptable in terms of fisheries development? In the paper, you said that you did mostly fishery resources study, but when it comes to actual operations of the fishery industry, what have you done? If you have done nothing about any assessment of the impact on fisheries operation, then don't mention fisheries industry at all. Just say fishery resources. Second question. Well, let them answer the first question first. Okay, yes, please. Airport Authority, colleagues, please. You've become fishery experts now. I thought only administration is the expert. Quickly, please. I have another question. On fishery. Now, in the EIA, we've done a survey with fishermen, including those who may be affected by the 3rd runway project. We've tried to find out for over 1,000 fishermen how the project might affect them. The Agriculture, Fisheries and Conservation Department also conducted report findings, so they also knew the impact on fishermen. Okay, let me come to my second question. You said you're going to build 2,400 hectares of marine park. Go back to that slide, please. How familiar are you with the policy on marine park? Now, maybe even if I assume you let us go in there for fishing, there's need for a permit, but a permit cannot be inherited. It cannot be transferred. That's why I want you to draw a plan on the areas where fishing is permitted after 30 years. Have you done any assessment there? In the EIA report, of course, we have done an assessment of the impact on the fisheries industry. We have actually a fisheries enhancement fund. We proposed that. Now I'm talking about the marine parks, the coastal marine parks. Yes, we know that these parks may affect the operations of fishermen, but that's outside the scope of the EIA study. But anyway, we realize there's an impact on fishermen. That's why we have put forward this proposal. Now, this is the EIA framework. You could say this is our commitment for this fund. In future, we would like to have more communications with fishermen. No, he hasn't answered my question, Mr. Chairman. After 30 years, how much water is left for fishing? Now, it doesn't matter if there's plenty of fish. If you put, say, tigers in a zoo, I can't shoot the tigers. Now, you just want to save the Chinese white dolphins. I don't know how that will benefit you, but here, 30 years, you are just drawing a circle to protect the fisheries. You try to confine them to a circle, and I'm really not happy with that. Anyway, you can answer that later. Ms. Sitho, I'm afraid I've drawn the line at Dr. Fernando. Next time, if you wish to ask questions, please come in earlier. There are 5 other members on the list. Mr. Chen is out, so Mr. May Co-Chair and Ms. Michael Tan is also not in the room. Mr. Frankie Yik, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me declare again, I'm a member of the Airport Authority Board. Now, for the third runway, I think we all support it. Many members have said that it's a matter of a race with time. We are facing keen competition. And I would like to respond to the Undersecretary. Now, the status of the airport is an international one. It cannot be kept unless we move more quickly. Now, a question on dolphins. Some green groups came to see me recently. They would like you to do more precautionary work. The administration is now proposing that for the Sky Pier, the ferry services will have to change their routes in future. It will be a much longer journey. But when I asked the green groups, now with visual inspection, they found that the number of dolphins has dropped at one point. But then there's no literature from overseas as to whether actually the dolphins have migrated. Now we have experts with us here. Can we ask them? Is it the case that they've actually migrated, or actually they have been displaced and their number is declining? Now, in 2013, there are 2.6 million passengers taking ferry services. If you reroute the service, that will mean an additional 1 hour for the traveling time. In terms of productivity, the time lost, and also because it's a longer route, that means more emission. So those are all costs as well. So how do we strike the balance? Is it not possible that we could not keep the original route after the construction of the third runway? Now, for Sha Chao and Long Ku Chao, we have the marine parks. Is it possible that we could still let ferries pass through those parks? I'd like to listen to the experts.
Yes, in relation to your question about, I think it was about the reasons for the declining numbers of dolphins in Hong Kong. And we believe that it's a combination of factors that are resulting in that. One part of it, as we mentioned before, is that we've seen evidence that dolphins are shifting part of their ranges into the part of the area that's further away from areas where development projects are occurring. And for that part of it, we believe that that is potentially reversible. And we've seen that in the past with the original airport development, that dolphins can and oftentimes do come back to those areas once the disturbance is lessened or gone. But we also feel that there's another part of the decline that is related to mortality of dolphins. And the 2 major factors that we've identified from the stranding program, from studies where we actually pick up dolphins on the beach and determine their cause of death, are fisheries net entanglement and vessel collisions. And we feel that this is, again, a reason why it's very important for marine park areas to be established in Hong Kong so that we can provide some protection for dolphins from these potential sources of mortality.
Right. Frankie.
OK，即係根據專家。
So from the experts, after the completion of the works, the dolphins could come back, but for the if there's busy vessel traffic, it may be a threat to the dolphins. But I don't know how big the body of data you have. We hear about a case here and there every now and then. But we're talking about the traveling public having to spend so much more time every year. What is the loss involved, and how do we strike a balance? Now, the experts telling us that if we don't do that, if you tell us if you don't reroute the services, then dolphins will be adversely affected. Then I have nothing else to say. Thomas, well, maybe you can speak in English next time so he doesn't have to wait for the translation.
Yeah, the challenge, of course, of trying to deal with a high-speed ferry issue is very, very difficult and very challenging. And we've been looking at a lot of different potential options. There's some situations where we don't have the full information on exactly how that's affecting the animals. You've also mentioned earlier about whether or not we have a large body of data on this. We've been collecting data on stranded dolphins since we started the research project back in 1995. So we have a long history of that information. But the reality of it is that most dolphins that are stranded in Hong Kong, the carcass is very badly decomposed, and it's very difficult, if not impossible, for us to determine the cause of death. So the reality of it is that our sample size is relatively restricted on that. But we do believe that vessel collisions and fishing net entanglement are the major ones.
好，下一位田北辰。
Next, Mr. Michael Tian. On the question of channels, Ma Wan residents have been complaining for a long time about the existing runways. They believe there's already a huge noise problem. It's not been addressed, so what should happen if there should be an additional runway? Apart from the south runway, for the center runway, they hope that you would also give an undertaking that upon the completion of the third runway, there it will be no fly for the center runway from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. It's not just the south runway, because the third runway, I think, is enough to cater for late night flights. That's enough. Please let them answer the first question. No, let me ask all my questions. For the new runway, 07L going southbound for 07C and 07R, actually there's a duplication, an overlap. And you can see the red line turning right is the same line. But then you tell Ma Wan residents that the noise from generated by third runway will be substantially less. Why? Because I can see is the line actually overlaps. Is it because they fly up to a higher altitude? That's why there's less noise. And for the 30 plus Chinese white dolphins, whether they will come back, there's been much debate or this contention about that. Of course, on behalf of Hong Kong residents, we would like to see the 40-odd dolphins coming back. Now, when the new marine park is established, the experts say that the dolphins will come back, but we have no faith in the government now. When the runway is built, we don't know whether there will actually be the marine park. So could the administration sign an operating agreement with the airport authority? So you include this clause that the marine park will be one of the conditions for the operation of the third runway. If the runway is completed but the new marine park is not yet in place, then no, you can't use it. So something like that. And third point, the airport authority doesn't seem to see a need for a rail link between Chek Lap Kok and Shenzhen. We're now building the third runway to increase capacity. I'm worried it may become a white elephant. As you know, the third runway is important because we have many international flights. People who want to go to mainland, we bring them to Hong Kong first. But then how do people then move from Hong Kong to the mainland? Well, you have transit passengers, but how do they transit? You don't even have figures. We have a huge potential in that market, actually. Now, there are just 4 flights going to Wuhan, but then from Shenzhen Airport, there are 10 flights going to Wuhan daily. So people who want to Wuhan would definitely not come to Hong Kong first. They will come to Hong Kong and then to find a way to get to Shenzhen and take a flight to Wuhan. That's why the rail link is important. But somehow you don't see the need for a rail link. I think you've got your calculations wrong. So can you explain that? You are spending $200 billion for the third runway. How come you do not see that the rail link between the Chek Lap Kok Airport and the Shenzhen Airport is essential so as to exploit to full the potential of the third runway? Let me take the last question first. When the Environmental Protection Department issues the permit, it will probably consider Mr. Tan's point about the marine park. That's the second question. Will or will not? They will take that into account. For Ma Wan residents and the rail link, can I ask the airport authority colleagues to take those questions, please? I'll ask Mr. Lee to talk about Ma Wan, the channel issue first. Now, whether the center runway and the south runway could be put on standby. Now, our runways have to go through maintenance from 1 a.m. onwards in turn. If we just put the south runway and the center runway on standby every night, then that means we can't. We can never maintain or repair the north runway, so it cannot be done. Now, if we have 3 one-way operation, of course, we understand in future with technological improvement, aircraft noise issue is being improved. And when we have a new runway, you can see on the map to the right, the west route that's to be used only by the more advanced aircrafts. You say that noise level would be less, but if it's not going to be the case, you have to watch the reaction of the residents. What about the rail link?
Mr. Christopher Chow, I also support the early construction of the third runway. My concerns have been raised by other members. I won't repeat them. I'm concerned about the increase in cost from over $100 billion to $200 billion, and this is a great concern. Well, with the runway completed, do you have any idea about the fees and charges? How do we compare with airports in the vicinity? Will we increase departure tax and increase the landing and parking fees, because that may lower our competitiveness as a result? So has the administration worked out how the future fees and charges will be to maintain our competitiveness? Under Secretary, well, this is part of the financing model. The AA is carrying out this study. Later on, they will submit a report, a funding model to the government to support the construction. Are there ways to lower our cost, to lower the financial pressure? Have you considered listing our airport? As a FC member from the financial services, I welcome quality companies to be listed in Hong Kong so that the community can share in the economic benefits brought about by the runway, and we can also monitor the operation. We're going to meet the CE in a few days' time. I think it's better to put the question to the CE. Under Secretary, yes, Mr. Zhang's idea is a good one, but this is a way for financing or raising funds. Of course, the AA's financing model has to consider how funds can be raised, but for construction cost and control, I'd like to see whether AA has any supplement. Well, I think it will be more appropriate if we start this discussion when we give the report to the administration to us at the end of this year. Mr. Zhang asked about fees and charges. Well, international airports have the principle of users pay. Of course, we will take into account the competitiveness of the airport. I don't think our competitiveness will be affected. Chris, I think they have to consider fees and charges of airports in the vicinity and how we compare with them, because our costs are really higher than theirs. But they cannot answer your question now. Next, Mr. Sin Chung Kai. Regarding coordination in the use of airspace. Now we have airports in Shenzhen, Zhuhai, Macau, and Guangzhou. They are all in the vicinity. With the full operation of 3RS, are you confident that we have enough time slots in terms of airspace so that we can maximize our 3 one-ways? And what will be the process? Do we need any coordination by Beijing? Are we confident that we have enough airspace for the full operation of our 3 one-ways? And I'd like to know, I'd like to ask about financing. The government has received $4.4 billion in dividend from the AA. The runway may be expensive. It may be 1,000 or 200, 100 or 200 billions. If the government can forgo its dividends, then 20, 30 years down the road, even without further capital injection, the airport authority will be able to pay for the 3rd runway. Financing is an issue, but the public are concerned whether everyone in Hong Kong has to foot the bill. If you can make money off the runway, perhaps you don't need to ask money from the public office. Regarding the use of airspace, we have discussed with civil aviation authorities of the mainland, and we have discussed how we can refine our arrangements. There is an agreement so that we do have a consensus to reach a certain target in 2020. The consensus has taken into account the 3rd runway that is being planned, so the use of airspace will not be a major problem. And only about 20% of our flights will use the airspace within PRD. Are you saying that with the full operation of 3RS, there will be sufficient airspace for Hong Kong to use? Our target of discussion with the main authorities have taken into account the operation of the 3rd runway. The government's dividends. What you propose is among the options being considered by the AA. Regarding future fees and charges, I will leave it to the financial consultant of AA to submit a full proposal for the government, and the government will decide whether it is reasonable and can balance the interests of all parties. A question for the AA. Without any capital injection, are you confident that you can take out borrowings, or can you issue bonds of the AA? So without any capital injection from the government, is the AA confident that it can pay for its new runway? Yes, the AA has a very profitable airport, but to be prudent, let's wait until we have the full financial report to be submitted to the government by the end of this year. Members, we are going to discuss this item until 12:15. Mr. Chang Han Pan is not here, and Ms. Sit Ho, who was late, has put up her hand, and Mr. Jeffrey Lam has just raised his hand, and Ms. Elizabeth Quad and Mr. Michael Tian has just raised their hands to us in the 2nd round. I think each will have 2 minutes. No. I've already drawn the line. I just give you extra time. All right. It's just a very simple question. It would be best if we can have a reply now. If not, we'll follow up in the EA panel. People We have people in the know from the green groups and environmental protection sector said that some experts' views on the conservation of white dolphins and waters nearby have not been fully disclosed. What has been disclosed is only part of the picture. Well, the EIA report should be EIA should be an objective and scientific study. Whether the government has adopted the views is a separate issue. And do you have any mitigation measures to tackle the possible issues or the issues raised by the experts? All right, my question for the administration and the AA is, can views from some experts not adopted be disclosed? I'd like to know whether they have fully disclosed views and recommendations by experts. If they want to lobby for our support, you have to tell us scientifically and objectively all the views given by experts. What are the areas which should be avoided or where no mitigation is possible? Please. The EIA report was submitted by the AA. It was not drafted by the administration, so I defer to the AA. Well, these views or such rumors are not accurate. Can I ask our experts on white Chinese dolphins to supplement? That can't be done because 2 minutes is up. Ms. Ho, your question was asked previously. Mr. Jeffrey Lam. People say that dolphins are very intelligent and not as dumb as some people think. If the habitat is affected, they will try to adapt or they may move away, they change their home range. So let's not be over worried, of course. We want to protect them as far as possible. So they believe that there are about 40-odd white dolphins. Have you considered applying a tag to the bodies and so that you can track their movement? Let me declare interest. I'm a member of the AA board. So how do we track the home range and movements of white dolphins? Thomas?
Yes, thanks. We actually have been doing tracking of these dolphins in Hong Kong since the mid-1990s. And we actually don't need to put any tags on the animals' bodies because we can use the natural markings on the back and the dorsal fin of the dolphins, as well as their color patterns to identify individual dolphins. So the information that we presented in the EIA incorporates that information that's been obtained from the last 19 years of research that was started by myself back in the mid-1990s and involved the collaboration of quite a large number of people, including Dr. Samuel Hung, who you know. And so we have quite good information on the home ranges of a lot of these animals that occur in Hong Kong waters. In fact, pretty much all the animals that occur in Hong Kong. We're able to sort of use that in the assessment.
How about the ability in moving their home from one place to another one?
Well, each individual dolphin has a particular range that it uses. It varies in size. Some are relatively small, some are relatively large. And we do see that the animals do shift around within those ranges. They tend to have particular core areas that are used primarily for feeding and mating and breeding activities, and other areas where they mainly just travel through those areas to get to the core areas.
Mr. Ampan, because you were not in the chamber, so your time has been distributed to other members. So I will rearrange. All right. The following members will have 2 minutes each. Ms. Elizabeth Quat. There are experts and scholars out there saying that we don't need the third runway in Hong Kong. And some members asked, because the third runway is so important to our pillar industries, the administration has to give us a report to tell us Without the third runway, what will be the consequences to Hong Kong? What will be the overall impact on our pillar industries, to our different sectors of the economy, and also the impact on our labor market? And if the runway is delayed by 1 year, assuming that we can't start works in 2016, what will be the impact if it is delayed by a year? I'm sure such assessments will assist the public to understand why we for sure need a third runway. I save a few seconds for Mr. Han Pan.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate, I see members, several members have already made a request for such figures and data. Perhaps when the financial option is ready, we'll see how we could provide further information in this respect for members. Next, Mr. Michael Tian. Your response about Ma Wan residents, I think that's problematic. You said for the third runway, it's different than the two other current runways. It's a bit further away. But if you look at the red line, there's some sharp right turn, and it will fly over Ma Wan. Which page is that? Which page are you referring to, please? Mitigation commitments on aircraft noise. There's a page number, or PowerPoint 10. Okay. Slide 10. The east flow flight tracks. Why is there a need for a sharp right turn? If you just go forward, and the Ma Wan would not be affected. But now you're taking a sharp right turn. Again, you fly over Ma Wan, and Ma Wan residents are not going to let you off. Why are you so stupid? Why did you pick such a flight track? I just don't get it. Because you have to think about it carefully, because when Ma Wan residents come to me, I'll have to come to you. So think about it. And here, economic benefits. We are talking about spending $100, $200 billion on the third runway. Especially we could link up with Shenzhen. We'll do the international flights and they do the domestic flights. And together we will be very competitive. Now you say there's no need for the rail link. Can you explain why? Can you submit reports why the rail link won't help the third runway? Undersecretary, perhaps I could ask the airport authority colleagues to answer the question on Ma Wan. The other question, now from the operating experience of the airport authority, we talk about cooperating with other airports. They've done some study. They find that maybe it won't help. But then for the upstream and downstream of the economy of Hong Kong, actually it may be counterproductive. Well, anyway, your time's up. Next, Mr. Pen Chen. I also want to talk about the slide 10. Now, when you build the third runway, there'll be 2 extra flight track, whether it's east flow or west flow. That means new population will be affected. New developments will be affected. Now, like in Siu Lam or Kam Tin, how many residents might be affected by aircraft noise? Whether you go east or west, you will fly over these settlements. So what would be the noise level? Can you answer that question? For the EIA study, we go by the standards in the guidelines for in the relevant ordinance. That is, we use NEF 25 contour map, and we do NEF 25 for projection. It won't cover any of those areas you mentioned. Of course, in the south of Lantau Island, some villages like Shalawan, they will still remain within the NEF 25 contour map. Well, the NEF 25 may not cover them, but then Ma Wan is also such a case. It doesn't fall within your NEF 25 scope, but there are still residents complain, and now you are shifting the noise to Tung Chung. So how many residents will be affected? You can't say that for residents here, they won't be affected by noise. And now with the third runway, there's a new flight track, so you have to tell us the information. Now, in our EIA, for aircraft noise planning, we have to go by the current standard of NEF 25. But then we've also done impact on human health as a result of aircraft noise. And we see actually improvement in the areas affected. Okay, that's the end of this item. Thank you for coming to the meeting, and my apology for meetings of this nature. Many members would ask questions, and so you don't actually have enough time to answer them. My apology. Next meeting will be on the 14th of July. For a number of members who came in late, let me tell you again, on the 17th of July, we will have a public hearing on the third runway. Mawan residents or others who have any views on the project, you could invite them all to come and give their views. Mr. Chairman, I appreciate your efficiency in conducting the meeting. I hope you will consider running for the post of the Finance Committee Chairman next year. Wow, that's a tough job. Anyway, thank you. Okay, we've overrun for this item. Next item is the toys and products, children's product safety, but I don't think we can finish at 12:14, so I would like to extend the meeting by 50 minutes, and so we'll end at 1 p.m. Now we need a bit of time to change the seating configuration or to change the nameplates.
咦，我以為林健鋒會喺度啊，佢做玩具嘅喎，或者聽佢解釋下啦。係邊份？各位
members, this item is about the Toys and Children's Products Safety Ordinance, the draft guidelines for control of phthalates. Can I invite the administration to take us through the paper? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With the support of this panel, we completed a public consultation, and then at the end of last year, the Toys and Children's Products Safety Amendment Ordinance 2013 was passed at the end of last year, as I said. Now we have proceeded to prepare to draft the Toys and Children's Product Safety Additional Safety Standards for All Requirements Regulation. The regulation is to regulate the content of 6 types of phthalates in toys and children's products. The regulations will commence on the 1st of July, having gone through vetting by LegCo. Now, the subcommittee set up to scrutinize the regulation, invited views from deputations. Those in the sector support the control. They see no problem with the control, but then they have expressed the view that for the operation of the relevant provisions and the regulations about controlling phthalates, they would like to have guidelines so that would give them some technical support, and they could refer to the guidelines. That's why we have prepared the draft guidelines. The draft guidelines are in Annex 2 B to the paper. The draft guidelines cover several areas. Most important one is about the scope of application of the regulation. And then we try to use user-friendly terms to explain the operation of the relevant operations, especially for certain key terms. What do you mean by putting it in the mouth? How should that be interpreted? Things that could be put in the mouth. And then we try to use examples and illustrations to explain those terms. The guidelines would also also include tests that could be used in general, and with the test certificates, say from other places, how these will be treated, and so also explanation is given in this regard. We've also consulted the sector on the draft guidelines. We've actually improved upon the draft guidelines upon receiving the views of the industry. So for the draft guidelines in Annex B, this is an improved version, having taken on board the views of the sector. That's all by way of introduction. I wonder if members have any questions. Thank you. 2 members would like to ask questions. Mr. Tan Kyung Pyo first. For importers or manufacturers, of course, they fully understand the requirements. They know how to adapt to the new requirements. We are talking about harmful substances or prohibited substances, and of course there will be improvement from time to time. But what about at the retail level? Shops, how should they handle such products? When it comes to selling children's products, we're not just talking about the chain stores. Many small shops also sell children's products. So what do you do about that? Would you take the initiative to conduct territory-wide checks? So you will first advise them, don't go straight into law enforcement. Like the chessboard issue. We don't want that to be the incident. We don't want that to be repeated. Some of the old shops really suffered. What about online retail? Now, BIPs could, or rather, some products, they could be sold second-hand, like high chairs or cots and so on. Of course, for dummies that cannot be sold second-hand. But then there are a lot of products that are sold online. We don't know actually they are first-hand or second-hand products. And how do you deal with that? What about bringing these products into Hong Kong? Maybe they bought something cheap and nice from the mainland for their own use. They may not know that they are not in compliance with the requirements, and what should be done about it. For small retailers, actually this issue was raised at the subcommittee. In terms of law enforcement, the customs will have regard to the actual circumstances. Maybe advice will be given, or maybe prosecution could be taken out. But we know that retailers may not come to grasp the requirements so quickly. So that's why we have drafted these guidelines that will help to explain things to the sector. And before the regulations even commenced now, the customs are holding talks for the sectors. They will also prepare publicity leaflets for distribution on the new requirements in the regulation. So usually the customs exercise would do education, not just about phthalates, because the regulation is more than about phthalates. So the customs exercise will do public education. They will go to kindergartens or nurseries to help them. But you haven't answered my question. Would they do random checks among all the small retailers? Would you first give advice before you take enforcement action? Well, in terms of random checks, the customs and excise is already doing that. If they find any products that may be in breach of the regulation after the 1st of July, they will give advice now. After the 1st of July, last time, when we had a discussion, we fully appreciated the issues involving the small retailers. We have undertaken to give advice first as far as possible. I think at the subcommittee we already gave that undertaking. But of course, after advice, there's still no improvement, then it will be a separate issue. For online shopping, the regulation covers that as well. because it's about supply. So any forms of supply are covered. But then we cannot rule out the difficulties in law enforcement here, because collecting evidence, conducting search, that may be a problem. Well, if I give away something, is fine, but what about I sell my baby cord second hand, $10, because this is rather common now. So would second hand products be covered as well? Yes, second hand products are covered, but in the principal legislation, that's already an exemption defense. That is, if it's a second product, that's actually a defense. Mr. Jeffrey Lam, you jumped to your conclusion that I wouldn't take part in this meeting because I'm in this business. Now, let me declare, I'm a toys manufacturer. I'm a director of a toys company. In the legislation, it's spelled out clearly about liabilities, the commencement date, and for existing toys, if they become the prohibited products because of the phallic content and how they should be dealt with. Now, the customs have started explaining the requirements to shops now. I understand. That's good. I think what is important is that for retailers and the general public, more information is given to them. Now, I have dealt with phthalates often. It's not really a toxin as such. It's just that because of the change in the regulation, so some of these phthalates cannot be used for producing toys. But such plasticizers are still used for producing other plastic products. For instance, bed. There may be plastic components using phthalates. In the law, it's not allowed, but for babies, babies may lick the plastic components. Well, that actually won't happen. The chance of that happening is low. Of course, Mr. Tan, the chairman, takes this very seriously because his grandchild is so important to him. But anyway, these are issues we have to deal with. But at the community level, when it comes to publicity and education on the new requirements, what is the progress of your work?
Thank you, Chairman. As I said, the Customs has started its series of publicity work, including holding seminars. Perhaps I can defer to my colleagues from the Customs to elaborate. Thank you. As the DS said, the Customs is now drafting guidelines on the use of phthalates in toys and child products. We are now visiting child care centers and kindergartens to brief them on the requirements in the relevant ordinance and to let schools and parents understand the health impacts or the potential hazards of phthalates to a young child, and also products that may contain such phthalates and how they can choose safe products. For instance, they should go to reputable shops and large-scale chain stores to buy such products. And we also have organized seminars for the trade. We explained to the trade the new regulations on the use of phthalates, and we also recommend that they get such products from reputable suppliers, distributors, and importers. They should not buy products of dubious sources that are particularly cheap from individual salesmen. And they should also check whether there is any information and labels on the components or ingredients. When necessary, they should inquire with the manufacturers and importers, and they should also pay attention to calls for information on recall of such products from shelf. All right, the ordinance is already passed. I think our members are comfortable with that, and thank you very much for your attendance. Thank you, members. In fact, we finished 10 minutes ahead of time. Thank you very much. Date of our next meeting, the 14th of July. We may start 15 minutes earlier because many people may come to the public hearing on the third runway. So it's 10:30 on the 14th of July. Thank you very much.